around alcoholism that, they talk about the 3 C's of alcoholism, which is, I did not cause it, okay, I cannot control it, and I cannot cure it. And, I think the hardest thing for a lot of people with whether it's your child or your spouse or a parent is feeling that somehow I was responsible. And I think we still carry that burden today. So I'm here to tell you, 20 years later, 10 years later, that doesn't always go away. But what advances the healing to where you can get past it is the more you can share. And so CARES for us was very personal, but it was really a mission of, we've been through something so incredibly difficult as a family. We wanted to turn it into something positive and help others. And I didn't feel like that the programs that were out there were really necessarily designed to do that. It didn't work for everyone. We used to say in the beginning that, socializing, we had a tagline when we started this 3 years ago, and it was socializing addiction to save lives. And really what it leaned in on was that this is a story that has to be told, and it has to be told more. And the program that we're doing now is about the education component of it. Because when I sat in that seat, I just wanted to learn all I could. And one of our other advisory board members said, I just wanted to learn what it would take to get me through the next hour or the next day. And so the education component of it is really important, I think, to help you get a handle on what you're dealing with. And I hope that you'll find community here and in this room and find people that you can talk to with whatever it is that you're experiencing. And I think the other thing that I would say about this is, I talked about what brought me here. It's this understanding that I never want to experience what Waylan has experienced, and it's in God's hands, really, right? But but I also want to acknowledge that for you, if you're here and you're here for reasons that that we are, that I did it all wrong at first. I tried to do the right thing, but I didn't know what I was doing. And there's an enormous amount of chaos, I guess was a good word. I used to call it being inside the tornado when you're dealing with somebody, in your family that is in active addiction, regardless of what it is. And when you're inside the tornado, it's hard, really hard to make good decisions. And there's a lot of bad decisions made, but they're the only decisions that you can make at the time. And you're just trying to advance yourself to a point where you can either get somebody in a safe place and give yourself a time to rest. And I don't think, I probably didn't sleep through the night for, 15 years. And, I think that in my case, God gave me this incredible ability to compartmentalize stress. But I think that the decisions that get made in that time frame, because you're not well informed, in my opinion, always of what the best path is, that, there's lots of room for improvement. So I'm going to eat up all of our time if I keep going. But I think what brought the two of us together was, we're guys that fix things, and we could make a list of what can get fixed and what needs to be improved and what we can do better. And we wear this guy out on a weekly basis of how we're going to get better next week. But I'm here to report to you that in the month of March, 650 people came to our website that, we threw up a couple of months ago. 650 people visited the website to learn about this program. And we're excited because through the partnerships of countless people that, we joke about having PhDs in this, but it's through lived experience. But countless people have come forward that truly are experts in the field. And they're so excited about what we're doing. It led us to the University of Texas and Renee and his team. And it gives us an opportunity not only to help the people here on Monday nights, but to spread this program to other churches and take it where it belongs. Because I think that in crisis, if families come to a church, is where a lot of times families are going to turn if they have any connection to faith. And even if they don't, if they come to the church and there's not a solution, then we've really failed as a community. And so I'll bounce it back to Renee or Waylan.
Well, I wanted to ask because one of the things you talked about was families endure destruction and pain. And our families end up being the first community that we're born into. And here we are, we're building a community or a family here of support. What advice do you give to, from your own experience or from what you are developing in this program here, to those families that are walking in the door feeling like we're in the middle of destruction, but we're fine. We don't need help. We're okay. We don't really have to share these things right now. And they're forced to kind of face a lot of this. I don't know if you relate to that. How do you get past that?
That's a great question. When you talk about community, we were just talking about that in the room, and I've known children, a child in a large family that felt like they weren't part of the family, but yet they're blood. They're there. They're under the same roof, but they felt removed or not a piece of it somehow, some way. Maybe the brothers and sisters did it, maybe whatever. I don't know the circumstances. But I also know when you look at a church as a community, I know people that go to church every Sunday and they're not a part of the community. To be a part of the community at church, I know this much, you have to want to and you have to participate. And so when I think about what we went through and the destruction of this person that had the addiction and the destruction, the ripple effect of what it did to my daughter and what it was doing to me, but I'm too busy ignoring it. And I'm, Mr. Macho guy. And that's why it hit me so hard when Russ talked about guilt last night. And I wrote down all layers of guilt. There it is. And you're guilty because you can't know it or understand it. And then you become guilty because you don't understand it's passed down through generations and all these layers of the things. And once the problem is evident, most people don't know where to go or what to do with it. And to get past all of those things, I made a comment about you have to give up control to get control. You have to share. Well, that's hard. You don't expose yourself. Our social media is busy exposing everyone, right? About everything. If only we had a pastor that actually taught a sermon on exposure. But you got to drop those walls. You got to realize if there's an addiction, there's a problem. Had someone come to me and literally had the conversation that Russ had with me last night, just that much, it'd changed my whole world. I'd have realized, wait a minute, I don't have to feel guilty because that's happening. I didn't do that. Or I didn't make that choice, or I didn't cause that situation. I can draw a line here. I don't have to feel guilty because I'm going to protect myself. I don't have to give in to this. I mean, we could talk about this for 3 hours.
You have families, right, that, like you said, the guilt, the shame, this is what creates these walls. We don't want to talk about this because people are going to think I did something bad or I should have done something differently, and so they don't come forward. This community that's being built, what do people expect that's different? What are we building here?
I think we're building a place that people can come and be honest. They can be open. They're going to hear real stories that they're hearing tonight, people that lived it and lived through it. You got one guy that lived in it and is in the backside of it, doing the best he can with his life and his daughters. And you've got a guy that my daughter didn't make it. And you know, I'm going to walk lightly here. Some people aren't going to make it that are involved in this. But that's the moment where you have to give in and put it all on the table, and you come to community, and partly you got to give it to God. If you don't, you got a different problem. But coming in and being honest with people and knowing you're not going to be judged, you're not going to go out of here feeling guilty, because the people in this community are not going to make you feel that way. You're going to get information. You're going to get knowledge. That is the absolute driving factor of what we want to do. We want people to walk out of here and go, I'm glad I spent the last hour and a half with those folks. Things they said made sense. It's not that difficult to not feel this way or not feel that way. I mean, to me, that's the simplicity of it.
So I would add to that the family aspect of it that I know many of you have experienced or are feeling now and what you're going through. The only way, and I've walked in numerous meetings on my path, looking for the answers, and but I didn't want to talk to anybody. I wanted to sit in the back of the room and not talk to anybody, not answer any questions, not ask any questions. And I think a lot of the people that come to those gatherings, feel that way. And so, in some of the programs, it's kind of a pass the mic on a topic. It's really more of a conversation. What we want to do differently, that some of the most valuable things that I saw were family day programs where there were, rich speakers, rich with knowledge that could just help me understand. And, and to sit with my kids and help to gain understanding around it. And that's what we want to replicate here. I think about it in terms of every day is family day. It cares from that perspective. So we're going to really bring really good speakers, aside from these two guys, to the program that can help you understand better what you're going through. The community aspect only happens if we can engage people in help, through conversation. And we're working on different ways to do that. The third piece is, it's community education and support. And I would say the community aspect of it, we talked about this earlier as well, is that, other programs are just meetings. It's not really a community, at least my experience wasn't. And that's why it sort of didn't work. And we were in a fortunate situation that we could get private help. And we spent a boatload of time and money on private help. And not everybody's can do that, and so if we can provide an environment where you can talk about it and are comfortable talking about it, can hear from experts, and then the support aspect is really what I was pointing to about, I wrote down what I learned. I learned a lot because it was a solid 15 years of my life. But I learned from lots of mistakes, some which are fairly expensive. And what I felt like is, from a resource standpoint, support comes in the way of, I need help. Here's my situation. What are the resources? And that also hasn't really, I haven't seen it in other programs. One of our advisory board members, we almost crossed paths at a program called LifeWorks here in town, where we both were on the board. He was actually a board chair, so I was just a board member. But phenomenal idea of bringing together resources in the community and creating the opportunity for a curated list of resources that the church, because our pastor here, Dan, will tell you that pastors are under-resourced and, don't have any time, and we've had this talk early on, it's like, how can we put the tools in place to save people, help their families, but point them in the right direction at minimum? When we went through our problem, we were at a really big church, and they didn't even have a Rolodex, and I'll never forget, probably one of the last times I attended that church, a lay pastor saying to me, if you find a good resource, would you mind calling me and telling me where it is? And I was like, really? I mean, my entire family is blowing apart, and that was not the answer I was looking for. So that's what we're going to change. And I can tell you that the entire system for recovery and addiction, a lot of it is a business that wants to take people into programs, and there's an insurance payment system in place, which is great. I mean, insurance needs to cover it because it's a big problem, but you need to know where you're going, and you need to know that where you're going is the right place to go and how to get the right kind of help. And that can be in the help of treatment programs, therapists, sober living facilities. And there needs to be some accreditation associated with that, right? And otherwise, you spend an enormous amount of time and money searching for hope, and you just want hope, and that Octavius Bishop talked about this a lot, and I think really we need to take, we don't need to talk about it necessarily as the disease. We need to talk about, actually, I read about another program that's really interesting, but we need to look for the hope. But the hope for the family and his duty as a family, and what brought us here and brought us together, is we do not want to see this reoccurrence rate thing keep going at the pace it is. We've got to help you, and we've got to help others slow this thing down. And the way we're doing it right now is not covering it. And that's what brought this program to life. And I've told this story a couple of times, but I would just kind of close with this, and then we'll go to questions from Renee. But one of the most powerful things that was told to me along the way, and it was from a guy that is remarkable, who's actually going to speak here in a few weeks, named David Clemens. And my commercial for this program is, come see David Clemens, and he's remarkable. And I think they call him in the recovery community Yoda or something. He's got a nickname, right? But he told me a story about, the family is in the quicksand, and, we're all in the quicksand together, and there's a rope. And, you're pleading with the person in the family that is struggling, and you're asking them to grab the rope, and they won't take the rope. And eventually somebody's got to grab the rope. and save everybody else. And so I think before we go to questions or discussion or anything that you guys would like to ask about, I would just say, you've got to get the rope. And in order to take the rope, you got to be armed with what the right steps are. You got to have the right resources, and you got to have the confidence and the relationships to be able to have these conversations with others who've been through this and get some advice in a safe place. And you were the guy that was going to do it. So I think that's what we're building. And I'm super excited about it. And I'm excited about it for everybody that comes through this door. And I'm excited about it for the next place we go and the next place we go after that. Because I really believe, when Dr. Cole told us at UT he thinks this should be a national program, I really believed him. And I'm really proud of the fact that we can start it here because it's needed here. And, if we just help a few people in this room, we've accomplished our mission. So that's it. That wasn't bad. I didn't get too emotional, but you said it was going to happen.
Yes. Well, these are personal stories, and what you hear every week here, you're hearing from professionals. You're hearing not just the information that professionals have studied or researching or putting out there. You're hearing the personal connection that comes with that, the personal stories, and this is why tonight was so important, because you too are visionaries and have taken what for a lot of people may be pain that stops there and said, we want to help. We want to go out into the community and make sure that there is a community of other people that you can reach out to talk to, that there is resources and education here. And as we transition into questions, and we're going to offer the space here for the audience, please encourage you questions. You've got two key people here who have a heart to develop something. And so you have questions here, please bring them forward. But one of my, yes.
I would add one last thing real quick to part of what Russ was saying made me think about it. I know part of this community, part of that vision is to help people understand that if you're a person being affected by addiction, I want to say this really careful. There are different components to it. It can be in a husband and a wife. It can be a husband and a son. It can be two siblings. It can be a father or mother. There's all kind of equations, right? Part of what I would hope anyone that finds out about this program, one of the things they understand, it is okay to acknowledge the person that has the problem and do everything you can to love them and be gracious and kind. But it is okay to say, whoa, 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 here's my boundary. And I don't know if it would have made a difference. I'll never know. But had I known enough to create those boundaries earlier, I'm still not fixing that person. But if I would have created the boundaries for myself as a husband and as a father and created those boundaries for my daughter, would that have made a difference? I'll never know the answer. She's healed. It's done. But I think a lot of people that are dealing with this, they don't even understand that. And if you don't have the support in the community to figure that out, you're never going to draw a line in the sand or have the audacity to stand on that line. I think that's a big thing.
We hear a lot from families that say, and I'll try to summarize the voice there that comes out, but it's my job. I am dad. I'm supposed to be the protector and the provider and the defender, or I am mom. It's my job to nurture and to care and to always pick up when they bruise their knee. And when you face addiction, and it's so powerful, and it takes advantage of that role as protector, provider, or nurturer, what do you say to the parent that says, you're telling me I have to establish a boundary, but that to me feels like I'm abandoning my child or I'm not protecting my family? And you get back into that cycle. What do you say to that parent?
Yeah, I think it's abandoning the child, or I'm abandoning my parent, or I'm abandoning, it's hard. It's really hard. And I think the most important thing is because you create a boundary doesn't mean that you don't love someone. And, but it's kind of back to until you have peace with the three C's and know that clearly that you cannot change the course of it. And that's when you can actually establish effective boundaries and get past it. And it's hard. It's really hard.
You said those three C's earlier. You can't control,
Yep.
you can't
Change.
and you can't
cure.
cure.
Yeah. And I think, one thing I'll add, and this was something else that I thought about that I wanted to share for those who, are dealing with this, that, we talk about it makes the whole family sick in different ways. And I think part of this codependence where I think I can change it, or I have to help, or I have to cure, and I keep having to go back. And we've heard so many great things on this stage, actually, in the first few weeks, that just things that come to mind. But for my own sake, my own situation, it was an obsession with, finding how this person was acting, or finding that, they were, having a relapse, or trying everything I could do to control that. And it becomes such an obsessive thing for a parent, a spouse, or a child, that they just become, totally obsessed with it. And that's the part where you've really got to create a healthy boundary. Because otherwise you are basically setting the family up for permanent impact from this that they will carry for the rest of their lives. And I know that's the case in my family. And I would do anything I could to change it. And that's what we're trying to do. But I think that's how I would answer that. So
30 seconds. When it got so bad that I was, you go through anger, I'm mad at her, I'm mad at me, I'm mad at everything. But it got so bad that my daughter was in physical danger. I said, that's it. I drew the line. When I left, she left with me. She was of age, 15. And when her mother died, 2 months later, her father called me and said, you killed her. I said, no, sir, she killed herself. That was ugly, but it was true. She's a grown adult. I didn't kill her. I drew a line in the sand to protect my daughter, and probably should have done it much earlier. Again, would that have changed my outcome of her? I don't know. But I can attest that there comes a time that it'd be better to draw the line in the sand before you have to draw the line in the sand. The outcome, the chances of the outcome are probably much more positive, because once you get to that point, it's kind of, it's not too late, but you're having to do something and you're being just reactive to what's going on.
As you talk about the things that we can't control, we can't change, we can't cure, and all the examples that you both have shared in your personal lives of those things that we couldn't do, I'll ask one simple question. For all the things that we can't control or change or cure, what can we do?
You can control yourself. Number one.
yeah, you have to. And it's a long time, at least in, my stubbornness as a human, before I accepted that. And I think that, you realize that you're not, and back to what my father told me when I was 25, I mean, you're not big enough to handle everything alone. And that's a really important part of it. And But you have to take care of yourself, primarily for the others around you.
What was who said the old rule about the mask on the airplane?
Yeah, you got to put your mask on first.
There's a reason you put yours on first.
Yeah, Tiffany said that.
Yeah,
And
and
you know, and that's the most thing. It talked about anger, because anger doesn't solve anything, and I think, you know, I'm completely at peace with this now, not because I'm on the backside of it. It's because I'm not on the backside of it. It's stuff that I'll carry for the rest of my life. But I'm at peace with it because I found peace that, you know, that I couldn't control it. And that's the only way you can get there. I mean, it without it taking you down. And the other thing that Dr. Clemens said, you know, he would ask, you said this in the beginning, I thought it was great. It's like, because I told him this a few days ago. He's like, how are you? Well, I'm fine. You know, and he told me after a while, he said, you've got a suit of armor that you put on every day, and you go out and do your job and do what needs to be done, and you act like nothing's wrong. And, you know, and I think that we all have a coping mechanism on how to deal with this, and we compartmentalize a lot of times things in our lives, and we say everything's good, right, when it's absolutely not. And it comes back in ways that are really, you know, tragic. You know, marriages fail. You know, other members of the family have problems, and I think that's learning that you can't get behind the armor, and you got to find programs like this or others to get help and talk about it is just super important. But
You gentlemen have shared so much, and this is probably the hardest part of the night. It's where we have no idea what questions will come from the crowd. But we know that you all have great experience and good answers, so we want to open up space here. For those online as well, if you want to submit a question, those here in person, thoughts or questions? We got a microphone going around.
Test. Okay. Before I get into, we actually have a wonderful question that got submitted. For anyone who doesn't want to go on the microphone to ask your question, there's a beautiful QR code up there. You can take your cell phone out, because I know everyone has your cell phone with you, and I'd be happy to voice your question on your behalf. But Waylan, we have a question for you, and like Renee said, this is actually a pretty hard hitter, but I'm excited to hear what you have to say. The question is, Waylan, how do you process the death of a loved one to addiction, and what practical steps would you recommend to someone who has lost a loved one?
The only answer to that for me is the only way you process it is with God. That's it. In my life, there's no higher power. Since we lost her, the things that have happened, the growth in me personally, in church, in being a husband, meeting Russ, our friendship, I could sit here and list a lot of things that have come out of that. The difference is, and I'm going to repeat it one more time because it's worth repeating, is Dan, our pastor, called me and he knew Brittany was close to death, and he couldn't get there physically. He was trying to. And he said, God told me to tell you this. And I'm like, okay. And he said, you need to go in there, kneel down by her bed, grab Sherry, and you need to say this prayer. And the prayer was simple. God, I need one of two miracles. I need a miracle here on earth, and I'd like to have that, but I'll accept a miracle in heaven. He said, do not go in there and pray this prayer if you don't mean it. You got to mean it or it doesn't work. And I'm glad I didn't think about it I didn't analyze it. I literally hung up, walked in the room, grabbed my wife, and I went by her bedside and I prayed that prayer. My willingness to be obedient in that moment to what someone I love that suggested to me, not everybody has that. So it's kind of hard. I'm telling you what my experience was, but the secondary answer to that is you have to process, you have to know that you love them, and you have to let God be God. Because if you don't have that faith and you don't have the belief that his answer is the right answer, we've all seen people get angry at death and mad at the church and mad at this. And if I would have gotten mad and I would have abandoned my church and my friends and my family, look at what I would have missed. I'd have missed a ton of my life that is some of the best parts. So I think in the moment of the worst part, you have to lean into your faith and you have to accept what the outcome is because we don't control it.
Thank you. That was a beautiful answer. We actually have more questions coming in, so just get ready. Russ, this next question is for you. Can you explain boundaries and how to put them in place when you're personally connected to the person struggling with addiction?
Thank you to whoever sent that one in. Look, you don't necessarily have to lose the love to create a boundary. And I want to say that first because, even after our marriage ended as well at that time. And, but I think the boundary really, again, is important for protection of not just yourself, but those around you. And it's kind of back to putting the mask on for healing. And it's not a perfect process. And when you deal with any kind of active addiction, and particularly, when it gets really serious, it's really hard. I mean, it's really hard. And it is a horrific disease that, and this whole program, coming here and doing it at the church is because it was the right place to do it. But, I really believe that active addiction can just rob somebody of who they are, steal their soul, but there's always, back to the hope. There was a young man here last week who was super impressive, who works at a treatment center here in town. And he shared privately with me that he went through 12 recovery programs before it worked for him. And that's amazing. That's amazing. And, so there is hope, but I think that the boundary part of it is important to getting a person to that point sometimes. And the active addicted mind this person is not, and that's why I say you don't give up love, because the nature of the disease is they can become very manipulative and cunning in what they do, and it's hard. It's really hard. And I think one of the programs that I went to, that this is another person that I hope that comes and speaks to us, talked about this topic. And it was the first time I heard this talked about in this way. And they said, really, the mind of the addicted person becomes, there's a change, but the mind begins to believe that it needs to have whatever the substance is to survive. And we talked about this a little bit last week because I think it's a really important topic that I hope we talk about a lot more. The number of prescriptions that are written for benzos today is alarming in our society, and it's grown exponentially through the pandemic. And so young people are going and getting prescriptions, when they're in middle school. and to deal with anxiety and depression and all these diseases that when I was a kid, at least no one talked about. I don't know if that actually happened. But the combination of benzos and alcohol is lethal. And it like amps up the impact of alcohol in the brain by like times 10. And we all need to know that, particularly if we have children, or any loved one that could be impacted, because a lot of people are on this medication today. And so I think that the natural response when a person's in that state, is to give in and help. But until you kind of set the boundary with them, you may not get them to where they need to be to actually take the steps they need to and be committed to recovery. And, this young man told me this story. He went through 12 treatment programs, and now he's sober. He's helping others. He's like this remarkable person that I met, and he's excited about this program. And I want to say something about that, too, because I thought about it a minute ago. I'm sorry, I'm talking a long time, but that happens with me sometimes. But the other things that I think about with this program is that people in recovery oftentimes want to serve. And this is a whole nother angle on CARES that I think could be really beneficial, because it was designed to be a volunteer-led program in the church, kind of like Mobile Loaves and Fishes is, that a lot of people are familiar with. And I think that bringing people in that are, even the people that are in recovery, and allowing them, because they've seen it from a different perspective. We have several people in our advisory board that look at it through that lens because of their lived experience. And bringing those people in and letting them help us build this is a remarkable opportunity to let them give back. And maybe they can feel some peace for maybe some of the chaos that they caused in their lives on others. And so that's something that I'm excited about. But I know the question was around boundaries. And
Well, speaking of boundaries, I want to maintain a good one, which is to make sure that we honor the time here that has been provided to us. So a couple things we want to say is, as more questions are coming in, we're going to make sure that those responses are provided online. So for those of you who are watching online, please, the biggest thing that we ask is to share the word. If this was a benefit to you, if this connected to you in any way, then chances are there's probably 10 people out there that it will also connect with. And for those here in the room, we ask, reach out to other people that you know that would benefit from being here in this space and being part of a community that's growing here. So we are online, Texas-cares.org. Website is evolving. We continue to post videos. You'll see this video posted, as well as additional resources that are referenced. And the idea is we want to grow this. So the vision that's been established is we have our experts coming out here. We have stories that are being shared. And then we want to create communities where people can actually work through with others about everything from family, dynamics, boundaries. How do you do that? Those questions are answered in a small group format. And that's coming very, very soon. So, and we're using evidence-based models, invitation to change. You can read about that online on the website, but this is only going to grow because it needs to. It needs to match the need that's out there. So let me just express my profound gratitude to the both of you for having this vision, for being vulnerable in this space, for being so open and connecting with everyone here who needed to hear these stories. And for those of you who are here, you all know we always wrap up the same way. So if it's your first time here, one simple sentence: welcome home. And if you've already been here, then you already know this is home. So keep coming back. We'll see you next Monday. And please share the word with others. Thank you all for coming out.